Hello and welcome to the WRRD Podcast. I am joined today by Summer Flynn. Hello, Summer. How are you?
Hello, John. I'm well. And yourself?
I'm great. We're talking about point of view today
Yeah,
using five books.
it's
And
crazy.
yeah, are we crazy?
I think so.
So the five books are Game of Thrones by George R. R. Martin, God of the Woods by Liz Moore, The Hours by Michael Cunningham, Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf, and Middlesex by Jeffrey Eugenides. And we're going to be discussing each book and the way in which the author chose to use point of view, how it worked, how it didn't, what we liked. And we're going to start with Game of Thrones. So, Summer, you're reading this
I
currently.
am. For the first time getting through it, I've tried in the past and didn't make it far because I judged it because there was a map at the beginning, and sometimes that's irritating.
Yeah,
But I'm
I
loving
understand
it.
that.
Spoiler alert, I love it.
What's different this time?
Um, well, this time I have read Stephen Erikson. And so I have a new appreciation for Martin, I believe. The simplistic language, the point of view that's very clearly defined. I know where I am, whose head I'm in. So the frustration to intrigue balance, I find that I am luckily staying firmly rooted in intrigue and not frustration. Whereas with Erikson, whew, I don't even know what beyond frustration, but that's where I lived.
For those who don't know, I beguiled Summer into reading Guards of the Moon, which I love. I love the Malazan Book of the Fallen, but I tend to do this with my friends, and I beguile them into reading it, and then we discuss that. But no, I also understand that as far as like uh I feel like with Malazan Book of the Fallen, there's more of, and we're not focusing too much on Malazan today, but I think it's a good point you bring up where maybe there's a little more work involved in reading Malazan Book of the Fallen than there is in Game of Thrones, and I think that's one of the first things that I wanted to talk about with Game of Thrones is how big of a difference does it make to the reader to have the name. So in Game of Thrones, the way that point of view is handled is there is a name at the beginning of each chapter. And that is the whole chapter. You know that is your North Star. That is your point of view character. This is going to be Arya for this entire chapter. And every internal thought is going to be Arya. And whereas with the book like Malazan Book of the Fallen, it's also third person limited, like
Mhm.
Game of Thrones, Song of Ice and Fire, but it does shift often and without, um, except for like breaks, um, like white space. Sorry, it doesn't cue to the reader like specifically. This is now Whiskey Jack, or this is now Fellison. And I'm wondering now. You said something about simplistic language as well, and I want to touch on that. But I want to ask you, Summer, as an editor of fiction, how much do you think that makes the difference? That kind of lantern hanging there as the name of the chapter.
I think it makes all the difference. If you think about the number of characters in Game of Thrones, I think it's over 10 POVs. So it certainly could be more Malazan-esque if we didn't have those lanterns, as you call them, at the beginning of every chapter. I think it lets the reader relax, but that's sort of the superficial response is, oh, this is Danny's chapter, for example. I can relax into knowing that I know where I am in time and space. I'm on the other side of the world, and you can relax
Right.
into that and take in all of those details. At a deeper level, though, it allows Martin to kind of build the tension and the dramatic irony in places. So the characters only know what the characters know. So as we start to get this fuller, holistic picture of what is happening or is about to happen, it adds to it sometimes that you're in Ned Stark's POV, for example, and you don't know what is about to happen. Ned does not know what is about to happen, for example. So I think it seems like it would distance the reader a little bit, but I think it actually has the opposite effect where you bring the author then can bring the reader in, like, so you're, in on it, so to speak. You start to almost know more than the characters know.
You mean
So,
because you have the bigger picture from the other point of view characters?
correct.
Okay. Yeah.
So Ned doesn't know some things, right? If we just use that example, and I don't want to do spoilers necessarily, but there are things Ned does not realize until perhaps it's too late.
Right.
And so we're in Ned's head, so we continue to get that perspective, which is limited to what else is going on. So in a way, it kind of humanizes the characters a little more because that's how it is in real life. You only know what you know. You don't know what you don't know. So it, I think, makes the characters much more dimensional when you have a POV in this way. I think it's on the surface probably feels easier to write because you think, oh, I just slap the person's name at the beginning of the chapter and away I go. But I suspect as we kind of talk more about this, we'll talk about the connective tissue that still has to be there. It is not enough to just slap a name on the chapter and move along. So there are certain underpinnings that need to be there to still make it feel cohesive because Game of Thrones could easily feel like several novels sort of stapled together,
Right.
especially the Dany versus everyone else. And it doesn't feel that way. It very much feels like it all goes together, and that is because of the strategic underpinnings, I would argue, that are there. So it feels more simplistic, this third person limited, but it's actually not. I think it's very strategic the way that he did it. I think we are able to have more characters and know them better because we have those single POVs. Whereas, you know, author like Steven Erikson will still throw in that many character POVs, but it's like within the span of a few pages. So it's very different goals, different accessibility for the reader. I
Right.
think Martin, it feels like he very much wanted this to be an accessible fantasy. And the point of view shows that, but also informs it and makes it so. It is an accessible fantasy. And I think it's only later, if you kind of peel it back, that you think about, well, what connects the characters outside of them all being in the same bound book, right? And in the case of Game of Thrones, it's things like, geography and everyone kind of starts out at King's Landing and it's kind of revolves around this one family and kind of bleeds out to those people who are most connected to the Starks. So you still have this connective tissue. They're not totally disparate character points of view that just happen to be in the same book. Each one is truly informing the next and building out the world. And again, I think it builds the tension that the characters sometimes are uninformed. They don't know about everything else that's going around. So it humanizes it and builds that tension when you kind of know, uh-oh, I know what's going on. It allows you to kind of really feel like you've stepped into that world more, which is the point of fantasy. You want really to invite the reader in, and I think Martin does it with a seemingly simple POV, but then also simple language, simple sentence structure, things like that.
Well, and I wonder too. I remember reading some time ago when I was trying to rip George R. R. Martin off, which I haven't stopped doing, but that his chapter lengths were like on average. I don't know how accurate this is. This is probably just like a Google search, but his chapter lengths were like on average 6,000 words. Um, so that's about an hour of average reading time, or like in an audiobook. Like that's and I listen to the Song of Ice and Fire audiobooks, and quite frequently they are about 45-minute chapters. So I wonder how much that has to do with it too, where you are completely getting immersed in this one person for 45 minutes. And like during those 45 minutes of reading or listening or whatever, like you said, using that simple language and using that the alliteration, the the bum 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 bum, bum, like all these bees. I feel like there's tons of bees in
Mhm.
bee alliterations in Song of Ice and Fire, but those things, as well as like I don't know how many of them have this, but like I'm just gonna call it for now like a catchphrase.
Mhm.
Like it feels like most of them end up developing, most of the characters in Song of Ice and Fire. Well, we're talking about Game of Thrones. Book one, uh, develop some sort of catchphrase. I remember like Daenerys is like, if I look back, I'm lost. And the Lannisters have Lannister always pays his debts, and the Starks have winter is coming. There's all these different catchphrases, and I wonder how much
Mhm.
that coupled with this like immersive 45-minute session also adds to like the like he's gluing them together for you, kind of.
Mhm.
Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
it does. I think you just articulated some of the reasons that it feels mythic, right? Because you really do get into one person's perspective. It builds that tension. So you're sometimes missing crucial information. The character is missing crucial information. So it kind of builds that tension for you. The fact that it's past tense, it's like builds this kind of mythic quality that I think Martin was trying to establish on purpose. It's hard to talk about POV without talking about tense, sometimes. You don't
Yeah.
necessarily think of them, but the two together can be really powerful. But no, I think you're right that that does add to the mythic storytelling piece of it, that you get so kind of lost in one person's perspective. But the way that he does it well is that you never have to, or I didn't feel that I ever had to go back to the start of a chapter to understand whose perspective I was in. The
Right.
rules were very clear from the beginning, and I appreciate that. Thank you, George R. R. Martin. I
Thanks,
liked it,
George.
yeah, appreciate it. It's you know exactly what you're going to get. And you're right for about how long you're going to get it. You know about how long you're going to be in this person's perspective. It's very I mean, I feel like Martin is a very disciplined writer when it comes to his strategies. So I don't know how much of this was thought out ahead of time, but it feels very disciplined. Like the point of view feels disciplined. The callbacks, as you say, feel everything feels like not in the same way that like a beat sheet feels wrangled and strangled. It doesn't feel like that. It just feels like there is a discipline and a reverence sort of for that structure and understanding what it's adding for the reader, which again to me is the clarity, the tension, and all of that. It can it can be limiting in some ways, but I don't think in Game of Thrones it is in any way. I think the not just reliance on it, but the reverence for the structure and adhering to it makes the reader very relaxed. Even at a subconscious level, you just can relax into Winterfell, or now I'm at the wall. Well, you don't really want to relax at the wall, but you can relax into where you are. You're not suddenly switching and all these things are happening and now you're in a different person's
It's
head, which
cozy. It's weird that
it's
it's cozy
cozy.
because it's
It
grimdark. Like it's very weird for that reason. I think is that it like that's maybe something the show still is cozy. I think to me anyway, but like with the books really get that where it's like yeah, I almost feel like Christmas with the winter and even at the wall and like watching all these people suffer and die and
Right. But you're right, it is cozy. You're so relaxed as these things are happening. You're just like, sorry, Bran, but I'm quite relaxed. But that is how it feels. It's just like but it's all subconscious, but it's because you're in good hands. You're when the author nails that, then the
Yeah.
reader's just putty in your hands. I mean, well, it doesn't matter. It's not about reliability or not. Sometimes it's structure. Are you dedicated? Did you choose the right structure? Are you dedicated to it? And when you are and do it well, then the reader is just going to relax, no matter what the plot and whatever's happening. But you're right. I would call this cozy, which is
Cozy.
not something I would have expected to feel reading the book, especially having watched it on, the screen. I didn't expect to feel cozy and warm and cared for.
Right. Well, and I was gonna we are talking. I had it on the list to talk about God of the Woods next, but I want to jump to Middlesex
Mm,
by Jeffrey Eugenides, and the reason I
hmm
want to jump to that is because God of the Woods has a similar enough thing to Game of Thrones. I kind of want to talk about something that is almost the opposite of this, but still like fucking nails it and has
hmm
that cozy feeling as well of like I'm in good hands and it never bothers me. It never bothers me when Eugenides decides to switch suddenly. So the book starts, Middlesex starts, it's in first person, what I call first person omniscient. And it's told in past and present tense. And it's from Calliope. Oh, what's his last name?
Oh gosh, Stephanopoulos or something. I don't know. That's not
Stephanades.
right.
It doesn't matter.
No,
Uh, it's Greek. Sorry to the
sorry.
Greeks. But it's from Cal's point of view as an adult, and he's telling his story, but not just his story, but the story of his family through generations. Following, and I don't want to give any spoilers away, so one of these things that I put on here we can't talk about. But it follows the gene through the generations up to Cal, who is a hermaphrodite,
Mhm.
um, who has both sexual organs, and that is kind of what the whole book is about: is how this translated from different people to him. So anyway, it's one of those things where while I'm reading it as a reader, when I was reading Middlesex, it doesn't jump. It if I was looking back on it, not paying attention, I would just not know what kind of point of view it was. I don't know if that makes sense, but like
Mhm.
there's a lot of books I look back on that were like good books that I'm like, oh, I don't. It doesn't matter to me. That's not something that's on in my awareness because I didn't give a shit what kind of point of view the author was using. But now that I'm like a writer and paying attention to those things, like I do remember, and I'm doing a podcast about it, so like, there's that too. But yeah, I guess I just wanted to pick your brain, Summer, about why you think this first person omniscient, which is that one first person narrator can go into other people's heads, um, why that works so well.
Well, my first thought is don't try this at home. I think, first person omniscient is not technically a point of view. I mean, he made it up and did it really well. But it's not something that a novice writer would want to attempt. Actually, that's not true. Attempt it. Go for it.
Do
Why
it.
not?
Fuck
Why
it.
not? someone has to start doing it. But no, the reason that it works is again, it's not flippant, it's strategic, and there has to be a connective tissue. And in this case, it's literally the gene. The whole book, as you say, is about kind of genes and when genes can go awry. And so the connective tissue is the gene pool. Like his trope is that I can talk about my grandparents when they were young because, I was in the gene pool already. So that's the thing that goes through the entire book, which is brilliant because it is
Right.
a
It is.
book about family and what we pass down literally and figuratively. And I mean, it's brilliantly designed. So it works because he has some kind of connective tissue, but he also up front tells you basically that he's an unreliable narrator. And so I think that is part of what makes it work is that again, you're told up front. In this case, by his voice is almost like this smarmy kind of narrator sometimes, and I think it's one of those books you love it or you hate it. I've read it a few times now and it does read differently each time. But I think it is in part because you're told up front that, basically I am a narrator not bound by time and space. And it works for that because it's very transparent. And I think sometimes I don't know, there's this pull as a writer to do something fancy and like if I confuse the readers, they're going to think that my style is very artful and it typically doesn't work when you do that because the reader just there's never an establishment of truth early on and so it can get just frustrating for the reader. But I think one way against that is to do exactly what he does here, which is just from the opening pages. He tells you, I'm going to be all over the place. I'm going to see things that happened before I was born. And then I'm going to see other things later in life that I'm not physically present for. But again, he sets up a very subtle connective tissue of this gene pool, and that being what connects every generation, which is just, I mean, it's really just smart. So he breaks the rules, but announces it from the very beginning of the pages. I'm going to break the rules. Here I go. And basically, he's like, I dare you not to love it.
Well, and like keeping to one big rule, it sounds like to me. That's what I'm hearing from you anyway, is that like and agreeing with is that he's telling you he's going to break the rules. He is breaking the rules, but he's actually under the surface sticking to the rule, which is keep that connective tissue through it all.
Right.
Right? Is
Yes. Yes.
that seems like the main thing here that is like holding Game of Thrones and Middlesex together. That's the commonality underneath both of them with their points of view is that Game of Thrones, we're all in the Seven Kingdoms. We're all part of the same family almost. We all know each other. We've got this history, except for Daenerys, but even she's part of the history.
Hmm.
And like it's the same thing with Middlesex. We're all a part of this family. And I'm thinking about I can't wait to make you read Infinite Jest. I keep saying that, but I think about that book too, and I'm not going to get too into it, but like there's a similar thing where it's like it's it's all over the fucking place. He breaks every rule. There's first person, third person. You don't even know who's talking. Just dialogue, but like all of it shares that same thing where there's this family and there's this halfway house, and it's like you've got those to kind of hold on to. So I guess what I'd like to kind of talk about now is I have a question as a writer who is like I'm working on something in the background that is like 10 first person points of view
Hmm.
all set in the same town. So anyway, my question is when are there too many points of view Can we have 10 first person point of views in different settings, or the same, or different? Do they need to come together in the end? When is it too much? Do you have any answers for me, Summer?
So I think Martin has proven that, I mean, what, 15 points of view is fine. When done well, I don't
Yeah.
know that there is a limit. There is a stress test, so to speak, that you can do, which is pull, theoretically, pull one storyline, one character's POV out of the whole, and does it all still work? If it works without that character's point of view, then you don't need it. You need to rethink that point of
Mm,
view. So
okay.
so again, Martin makes it look easy. It's just, oh, I put the character name, I slap it on the start and move along. But the meaning has to connect. So it doesn't just mean the characters have to cross paths or be from the same town, or they have to share a meaning. And I think this is where we could potentially get into some of these other novels.
Yeah.
So, we look at, Mrs. Dalloway, for example,
Yeah.
what, or the hours, the characters are not in the same time and space at all, right? It's from kind of
Yeah.
three different places and stuff, but they're all grappling with the same question. What's a life worth living? Is my life worth living? So that is the meaning that is there throughout. So I think for a writer, it is you have to go deeper than I have, these characters and I'm going to just one after another put their points of view and it's all okay because they're from the same town. No, that doesn't mean it's all okay. Is the meaning the same? Are they grappling with the same things? Are they, in the case of Middlesex, it's like the recessive gene is the thread. So you really have to go deeper and think, what is the thread? It's not enough that they're just bound in the same book. Right.
Yeah.
So the writer is the one who has to distinguish that because the reader will immediately know. They might not be able to articulate it, but they will know this feels like chapters stapled together. This does not feel like each POV is furthering the story. So you have to get real really early on with POV is not something that we tend to think about or talk about a lot. You read a book and you just really just go with it unless you're a writer who's dissecting it and looking at how how the writer does certain things seamlessly, when it works, when it doesn't work. You typically just take the point of view for granted. It's just the how the world is built in front of you. But and a lot of times for writers, the idea or the character or something just will come to them. And a lot of times the POV is inherent in that. So when you kind of have this idea of this particular character in a particular situation and you decide I'm going to write about this, usually the POV is already kind of embedded in that idea that is dropped down into your soul. But that's a good moment to stop and think before you get into it. Is this the right POV? So, for example, with Middlesex, what does having that first person omniscient add? He could have just as easily done every chapter from a different family member's point of view, right? And
Right.
we could be going back and forth from in time. That would have certainly still been a really interesting book. But it's not, it would have lost so much really if it wasn't this first person omniscient. So then you ask yourself, what does it add that I'm with one character? You know, what emotional, subtle tone does it add to hear about a brother and a sister's early relationship together? And that turns into a romantic one early on, so I don't think we're spoiling too much. But that is an interesting story to hear about. And we could talk, there's another Game of Thrones callback, this incestuous sort of storyline, but it's an interesting
That's what
story.
this podcast is really about.
I think it actually might be. Whoopsie.
That's how you do it, people. You make it interesting by including incest.
There you go. That's the takeaway. But I would read a book about, the grandparents in Middlesex. That's an
Yeah.
interesting storyline. They come over, to America and they're on the boat and they have this whole thing. But the story is made even more interesting because I am learning about it from their grandson. So
Right.
think about
Right.
how that adds to the story. It's not just these are these two humans. No, these are like the mythic matriarch and patriarch of our protagonist in the book. So
Well, and
it's
there's a great tension there too. That's like you have that great beginning part where he's introducing and he kind of like alludes to things that are going to happen. He's like, I could tell you about this, or this, but really, it starts with a gene, and then like it gives you the voice, it gives you the tone, it gives you the character, gives you all these things, and then he goes way back. We're going back in time now, and then like you get this wonderful tension of like wanting to get back to to Cal. I don't know if you felt that, but I did when I was reading it, where I was like, it it almost made it a page turner because I was like, and I got into the story of the grandparents as I was reading it, but then I was like, all right, okay, and where's Cal? What's this have to do with Cal? I know it has to do with Cal, and then I'm like, oh, and that's part of what has to do with Cal, and then yeah,
right. Yeah, when it's done well, when it's chosen on purpose, it definitely can add to the tension in a positive way,
yeah.
especially for a mystery, which is a segue into God of Woods.
Oh, no doubt.
I was setting you up, John.
Well, hold on, because
Okay.
I forgot,
Oh,
Summer. That was a great segue, but here's the part of the podcast where the podcaster interrupts. But I'm not going to ask you to pay anything, people. No, I am not here to ask for your money. What I am here to do is I'm here to tell you that today, at the end of this podcast, I get to force Summer to read a book next month. And I have picked that book. I don't know if she's picked one for me, but this is a new addition to the podcast where we will pick, at the end of the month, we will pick a book for the other one. The other one must read in the following month. Yes, and I'm not going to tell you the title of this new segment because it's secret, but it's not. You have to do it. It's not consensual. Well, it is, but you know what I mean. Anyway, stick around for the end of the podcast to find out what I am going to force Summer to read next month. And Summer, now, God of the Woods. This is the first book that Summer actually, after she started editing my books, had me read, because of the structure and because of some of the rules that are kind of broken, but we still have this thing that works. And so each chapter is a point of view character, and it's told from past and present tense, going back to the 1950s to 1975. And so the bed is empty in the present tense, and the bed was empty in the past. So
you're
anyway,
so smart, John.
oh my, thank you. I've learned. That's all. That's all I've learned. Okay. Anyway, so tell me what works about God of the Woods and why you loved it so much.
Well, it works. It's similar to the styles that we've been talking about, where there's an orientation point at the start of each chapter. The two novels we've talked about thus far, the orientation point is the character's, is the can be the character's name at the beginning of the chapter. In this case, the orientation point is a timestamp. So you're not necessarily told whose head you're in as much as you're told where you are in a timeline. So
Well, aren't you
the
told both? Aren't you told both?
you might be
Like,
told both.
yeah, I
Yeah.
think you are. I think
Right.
it's each chapter is the character name and a date.
Right, because you can be in one character, but there's a big span of time. Some of these
Right.
characters, right, that we follow or kind of we touch down into their lives at different points. So the date becomes the orientation point. But again, it allows the reader to kind of relax. We know exactly where we are because the story itself spans, well, it's really like what, two or three generations. So the connective tissue in this case is the locale, right? We're always at the same camp in the Adirondacks, and the
Right.
family. We're always talking about what is it? Van Lars.
Van
We're
Lars.
always
Yeah.
we're always talking about the same family, and we're always talking about the same location. So the reader is not ever having to figure out, now where am I? The reason I think that this structure works so well is because it creates this dissonance for the reader, kind of back and forth in time. But this being a mystery, it adds to it. So it's very strategic. Just as you're getting a little bit of information from one character, then you switch over. I mean, her chapter endings are really quite well done. It's just enough kind of suspense to lead. You get enough satisfaction of what you've learned in that chapter and enough suspense to, you almost want to flip ahead to that character where it picks up again,
Right.
to follow it out. But that dissonance that the reader feels is on purpose to build that tension and that mystery. So again, it invites the reader in. Sometimes those POVs really invite you in because you end up almost being the kind of the detective with a capital D, right? Because you have all the information as the reader. So in a way, you start to feel this like, oh, I'm going to figure this out, right? Because you're the only one who knows all of it. There are detectives in the novel that are doing some of the research work, but it's exciting that it makes the reader subconsciously feel like they're in there solving the crime as well, or at least trying to. So it invites the reader in a new way that you could argue that some other different kind of POV wouldn't. And this one is, third person limited with multiple points of view. So you're still getting a really broad understanding of what's happening in the characters, but that it adds to the mystery framework in this case, I would say, because I'm not usually a huge mystery fan. That's why I really liked this one because I felt like it was a mystery for a general audience, and it has done
Yeah.
amazingly well. So clearly, a general reader who might not be a genre reader is still finding this really accessible. And I think it is because of the structure, because we're always going through again the same locale, the Adirondack camp, the same family, but also, we talked a little bit ago about the meaning needs to be cohesive, and in this case, it's kind of grappling with the same questions of class, different classes of society, rich versus poor, that is the thread that is subconscious for the reader. I don't think it's ever stated outright that this is what this book is about or a theme, but all of the characters are grappling with or are examples of that, the disparate classes and how the friction between those can, in this case, adds to the mystery and the barrier to solving a crime or
Would you call
crimes.
that crimes? Would you call that theme? Would you call that like so you're talking about right now in God of the Woods, like there is I probably the most on the nose one is that the mansion built by poor people is called self-reliance that the rich people live in. And so that is like a an underlying theme, right? Of
Yes.
the story as a whole. And that is also that kind of subconscious meaning. Is that all the same thing, you think?
Yes. I'd call that like the thematic glue.
Okay.
And I think one of the hardest things for readers and writers alike to do is to read a book and then say what's the theme. I used to get, even looking at my child's like homework and stuff. It's like the first question that, a teacher might ask. That is the hardest question to answer sometimes.
Yeah, yeah.
You know it, but
Frustrating.
articulating it because no writer is going to state it outright. Occasionally, you might get hints from the, epigraph or the title or something, but generally the theme gets to more of those kind of primal, subconscious understandings that are hard to put into words. But yes, thematic glue is what we're talking about here, making sure that they all fit together in an organic way that doesn't feel like the author stepped in and said, they go in this order. It just feels like they go in that order. That's my author voice.
You know what? I'm gonna break the rules here. And I'm gonna bring back in Gardens of the Moon. So our secret sixth book.
No, no, it is not. No, I quit. I quit. Where's the leave meeting?
this, this is how I've once again beguiled someone into talking about Malazan. No, I wonder about that because I know in Gardens of the Moon, reading it twice, Gardens of the Moon by Stephen Erikson, reading it twice, what it took me two times to get to it. And so maybe that is like one of the things that's really different too about like my response to that book specifically in the series. But it was like the thing that kept coming up in the book as I was reading it that became very powerful for me, on the second read through, was the theme. The theme is what got me into this like really powerful headspace. But I don't know. Maybe it's almost like, because in the first read through of Gardens of the Moon, I wasn't like super into it. I was into it, but like the second time when that theme really came through, it was almost like the theme took precedence over everything else. And like, so I guess what I'm trying to say and ask really is, because I love Gardens of the Moon, but it's also that's not how I want to write a book. Um, is can there be too much theme, or I mean, I know there's no rules, but like, can there be too much theme? Can it be a block too? This thing we're talking about, this connective tissue that is making these different points of view, uses of point of view work. Um, can there be too much of that? Is there a balance here?
Yes, I'd say there's always a balance. And I would say with Gardens of the Moon, I would argue that the reason the theme became so important to you was because that is all that your brain could grab onto and hold onto. Now, you could make an argument that Erikson sat down and planned it that way. I would say most likely not, that is a good example of when a reader can't hang on to anything, you got to find something to hang on to. So whether that's connecting really deeply with maybe one particular character, or the theme, as you mentioned, starts to sort of bloom within you, like, I think it's just the brain trying desperately to grab
Oh
onto
my god.
something in a room that's being shook up. And so you're like, what's the closest thing I can grab onto? This vase. Okay, for you that vase was the theme. Um
we are gonna we're gonna be the channel that's just arguing about whether
you keep
Malazan
bringing it
is
up.
good or not.
This is not a Gardens of the Moon podcast, I would like to remind everyone. And
Yeah.
yet, here we are once again.
Here we are once again. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Yeah, that was good. Well, let's move on with that into talking more about Mrs. Dalloway, by Virginia Woolf, because I feel like it has yeah, I feel like it kind of goes along with that, where it's breaking a lot more rules than the other ones. Um as far as point of view is concerned. Now, I only read this. I read this book once, and it's, it's beautiful, and like the sentences are like what really carried me along, and but I feel like a lot of that for me personally was that we were set in the real world, in London with familiar kind of language and setting. So there was like room for Virginia Woolf to do the stream of consciousness thing, to like go, and now we're inside of a tree and like,
Hmm.
that kind of shit. But still, I don't understand completely like what's underneath there that's working. And as somebody who likes to just sit down and just start writing random shit down that doesn't always work, as I'm sure a lot of people are, I tend to think in my head like, well, like Virginia Woolf, she just went for it, and it's just crazy and whatever, and she killed herself, and maybe I will too. But that's the kind of I'm wondering what works about her doing it, and if you can
Well,
tell.
and since we love to connect things back to Gardens of the Moon, right? The reason we're
No.
the reason we're here is because on discussing Gardens of the Moon at one point, I brought up Virginia Woolf, right?
Yeah.
And asked you if you had ever read Virginia Woolf because there was some similarities there.
Yeah.
So I think this is where you and I can agree, because Virginia Woolf to me is just a god, for many reasons. But yes, you could argue that she is Malazan, her work is Erikson-esque in that it breaks rules. It doesn't even care about the rules, much less like, am I breaking them, right? She just
Right.
really came up with this stream of consciousness, omniscient point of view that there are no rules. You can be just like with Gardens of the Moon, one paragraph you can go from inside a character's mind and then a car backfires and now you're in a different, you're basically experiencing how all of these different people experienced the backfiring of the car, right? So why does it work? Well, does it work? For me, it certainly does. But again, I think these types of writing are meant to be polarizing. You love it or you hate it, you get it or you
Right.
don't. I
Yeah.
think Woolf and Erikson would probably be pretty similar personality wise. Very kind of renegade. I love that in a writer, just to make it up and make it work, which Virginia Woolf does, and then has been, you know, people try and replicate it all the time. So one of the reasons this works, and I think one of the reasons that she can do this stream of consciousness, and change perspectives, multiple times in one paragraph, is because the setting in this case is the glue. We are always in London. The Big Ben is always striking throughout. It's not a long, this is more of a novella. It is constantly striking. And so that to me shows a writer who is breaking the rules and creating a new stream of consciousness style, but understands that that can be unmooring and chaotic for a reader. So what does she do? She gives you an ironclad setting. You never leave London. You never leave that day. You are there. You know exactly where you are in time and space. So then, because the reader feels rooted in that, they go along with this style of, going from one person's point of view to another. And then you think about, why would she choose this point of view? And I don't know the answer. For me, it always felt like there's a sweet kitty cat. It felt like she was exploring the idea of private reality, that is something that maybe she grappled with, was interested in, how we can all experience one thing, for example, the backfiring of a car, but
Right.
we all experience it differently. So I think her larger point is, what's real, what's, real with a capital R versus lowercase r. And it furthers her theme. That thematic glue is a little bit about perception and reality. And I think that's ultimately what the book is about, is a study in that a little bit. And so this stream of consciousness style allows her to show that without telling it. She never talks about, our perception becomes our reality. She doesn't have to do that. The whole book is an example of that, that how we perceive the world becomes how the world is. And then we react to that accordingly. We take human action based on that. So, she also, I think the title, it sounds very simplistic, but that can be a lantern, right? She
Right.
just lets you know the orientation point is it's all really coming back to this one character. And then even that's smart. She doesn't call her Clarissa. She gives her formal married name. Again, that's saying something a little bit about we're talking about roles, reality. So when our bodies are firmly planted in one place, then the mind is free to roam. And that's why it works for me. I'm not frustrated thinking, where the heck am I? In the same way that I might be in, for me, Gardens of the Moon. I didn't have that frustration. So I got to kind of have the fun of Malazan's work, but with the groundedness of Virginia Woolf's work.
Right, right. No, I think that is like incredible. I'm totally that's Gardens of the Moon snuck up on us in this podcast, and it's going in the thumbnail. It's gonna
Oh
be
no.
sick.
Oh no.
You're gonna be holding it, Summer, and loving it. I, but I think that's so like, and we talked about this more in our Gardens of the Moon specific video, and about this exact thing. Which is that like there is we're breaking a lot of rules, and there is so much of that in Malazan where we are switching points of view just to look at this one thing from a different angle, and it's all shown and not told, and a lot of that is like heady and hard because I think and you have to put some work into it because you have literal like you're literally going into a god's veins when you like open a portal. Like that's a literal thing that's happening in the world. So then when you are figuratively, like perceiving reality differently, it can be a little not a little, very disorienting.
Right.
So anyway, very good stuff. That makes me, what did you have something to say?
Well, I didn't mention, but you touched on it, and I want to make sure, you know, people understand
Yeah.
that for this book, I mean, I think another reason it's so firmly grounded in time and space is so that the language can go where it wants to go. And you're right, we can't talk about Virginia Woolf without really emphasizing that not only is it her point of view that was so unique, but I mean, so lyrical. Like there are passages where, the language is everything. It is not
Yeah.
about what's happening. It is really about, oh, just those like beautiful inner musings. And it almost felt like Virginia Woolf didn't want to be limited to one character when she
Right.
wanted to be able to, and that is something about Virginia Woolf is even, stream of consciousness, she can jump in and out of people's perspectives, but there is a tone that remains consistent in her writing that I think is part of the glue. So it's almost like you get a character's perception told with Virginia Woolf's tone. It's almost like she is
Yeah.
in there a little bit, which I don't typically love, but it works. And I think in the hours, which we'll talk about soon, that is part of what's embedded in that is trying to capture that stream of consciousness point of view with the tone of Virginia Woolf. You talk about a difficult writing assignment. Try to capture that. Pick your favorite author and then try to tell a point of view from a character, but with the tone of your favorite writer, not as don't write a book like that, but just as a writing exercise. That is not easy to do. And I think that's another rule that Virginia Woolf broke, which was it's almost like you're in, Clarissa Dalloway's head, but you're actually being told her thoughts through a different
Yeah.
perspective. So it's
Yeah.
like a really, if you sat there and just unraveled it, I don't even know that we have literary terms for all of this. I don't exactly know what all of that is called, but the fact that Virginia Woolf just inserted herself into every character's brain in a way, makes it, I think
Omniscient.
it
Double.
double omniscient, yeah. But it makes it so lyrical. It's like she put her mark on everything so that it has this Woolf lyricism throughout.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you're, if it's too bad, I don't know. It's too bad you can't write the tagline for the hours because that would be that was an incredible selling point of that book. And I read Mrs. Dalloway after finishing the hours.
Mm-hmm.
Now, personally, what got me most interested in the hours was the perspective of Virginia Woolf. Um, and I don't know if that's just because she's a writer and like so she's dealing with writerly things, and I like to read about writers. But uh, what was incredible is that, like you're saying, each character has that, and I keep coming back to like this tree, and I don't even know if it was in any of these fucking books, but like there's like this kind of like thing that they both achieve through words, Michael Cunningham and Virginia Woolf, of like taking you from this person's mind back to somewhere where there's this tree that they're thinking about, but they're like inside and part of this thing outside of themselves. That just kind of like blew my mind about it. Like you said, it's like the connective tissue is that's in there is almost just the words, like the way, like reading the words are the connective tissue. And but in the hours it feels like there's more of a there's more of a point of view brought in to each section, like the three main points of view. There's more of like a grounding in like character. So anyway, that's what I think, and that's why I think the hours was more. It was easier for me, and like plot wise, was I was able to like get into it more. But Mrs. Dalloway was definitely more like felt more like poetry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I think that's what she meant. She's clearly, I think probably a writer because of her interest in the human psyche. Almost feels like writing is just secondary, and it's really her following that interest in the psyche and the consciousness. And, we know just details of her real life and why kind of all of that would make sense. And I think that's why a lot of people go to her writing is because she just as a person, she's interesting and we kind of know some of her demons publicly, and so it's voyeuristic in a way to go in there and read all of this, but it is, you could argue, more of a statement on human psyche than it is a writing, but it's masterful. I mean, high art in my opinion. But other people would read it and be like, "What's she talking about?" I'm in this woman's mind and now I'm in a veteran's mind, and but all of it is adding to the same goals. But
Right.
yeah, she such a unique style. And then I mean, I think in the hours, Cunningham kind of nails it. I would not nails her, emulating her style, which would not be easy to do. I can't imagine writing a book and then making a writer I admire one of the characters. I mean, like, I'd get struck by lightning. I'd be too scared. How do you do that? It's like brazen. We'll call it brazen.
I have a note on here that says the body always knows where it is about Mrs. Dalloway.
Yes, because of the scene never changes. London is almost a character. We know where we are.
Right.
We never leave it. We never leave the day. We're in one day, one place. The body stays there the whole time. So that allows the reader to relax into the stream of consciousness.
Okay, well, it feels like we've got a good idea of what is holding each one of these narratives together, at least to us two,
Hmm.
so I'll go first. I want to discuss which ones work best for us. Um, my personal go to is the Game of Thrones God of the Woods type point of view when I am writing a book because I get bored. And so then I go to the next. I'm like, okay, and now I'm going to start a new point of view. And I try to make it all I try to make there a reason for it. But my favorite out of these, as far as which one is the coolest and excites me the most as a writer, is definitely Middlesex. And when an author does that, um, the Wind Up Bird Chronicle kind of does this too. It's a first person, but you can go in and out of other people's heads, other people's stories, and it doesn't matter. It's completely fluid. Everything works. Um, that's what I love that one the most. And so I think that the third person jump from this character whole chapter, this character whole chapter is what works best for me as a reader. But the one that excites me the most is the Middlesex
Yeah, I agree.
book.
For me, it's Middlesex and Mrs. Dalloway, and for the same reason, because both of the books kind of do something new. You know, with the publication of those books, writers changed how they wrote. I mean, maybe that's a grandiose statement, but some writers changed how they wrote. I mean, it opened up kind of what can be possible, what you can do, the kind of rules you can break, and the reasons why. So I think for writers and for the future of publishing, those two would be my favorites, just because they pushed that further.
Yeah.
And even as successful as some of these other ones are, I just think the ones that, go above and beyond the norm is just, I agree. Those are what are exciting and inspiring, even though the others are completely enjoyable. And it's really less about what the writer likes to write and more about what does the substance, what you're writing about, what does it require? So I think it's never a good idea for a writer to think, oh, I'm a third person writer. No, you're not. You just, that's you either forcing that on your idea or not being open to other ideas. But there has to be a moment strategically early on in the writing where you stop and think, what point of view will serve this story the best? And then be disciplined to that. But I think those definitely some of these books that really opened up what could be done are what's exciting about the lineup that we have here.
Yeah. And what a lineup.
What
What
a
a lineup.
lineup. Who does 5 books? We didn't really talk
Six.
about there he goes again.
We
We
didn't
didn't
talk
really
about
talk about the hours. We kind of brushed past it.
Oh my gosh, let's go back to it.
I mean, I think we should.
Tell me what you have to say about the hours.
Well, so what I love about this, I guess we've touched on it a little bit, was the fact that, Michael Cunningham tried to emulate, I think quite successfully, Virginia Woolf's style in writing about Virginia Woolf. I mean, it's so meta. He took how how she wrote about others and applied it to her,
Right.
which is again, what a fun writing assignment. So in this case, the narrator's in third person, and then there are three women that each chapter belongs to. But then occasionally he'll dip into kind of what a secondary character thinks about a primary character. So there's still a little bit of blurring the line, and mostly present tense, I believe. So and stream of consciousness. So we get a lot of the callbacks, not only to Virginia Woolf herself, but to her style. But again, it tells you right up front, you realize there are three strands of storytelling I'm going to be told. So it's the same, we're getting some of the tips here from these writers of how to do this well. One is, you lead with it. There's no,
Yeah,
you don't flip
that's
it, you
good.
don't switch it up later. You lead with it. So you kind of set up your case early for, this is what to expect. You also, in the hours is a good example of what you talked about, where you really have time to settle into each perspective before you switch to another one.
Yeah.
So, which
Yep.
is helpful in this case because you're going to different, from the 1920s to the 90s, and it could be chaotic and disorienting, but it's not. And then again, the thematic unity. So all of the women are kind of circling that same question about the life that they're living. Is it enough? Right. So even though the characters are different, the timing is different, the setting is different, the thematic unity is still there and it is tight. And maybe a little more overt in this novel than the others we've discussed in terms of that thematic unity. I feel like it's a little more in the conscious level than the subconscious. At least to me, it feels that way.
And what is that? What is the thematic unity?
I would say it's, do you choose life or death? Period. That's it. Kind of for me, it's three characters who are all grappling with: is this life that I'm living the
Mm.
life that I want?
That
Do I
kind of
choose
changes the whole book for me, Summer. You
right? Do
saying
you choose life
that.
or death? And
I want to talk about that, but I can't.
okay, why?
Spoiler?
Oh,
No,
well,
no, no, not what you're saying. Just what I'm thinking right now. I'm like,
oh,
it. You saying that gives a whole new meaning to one of the characters'
oh, sure,
choices, and then
right,
another one that you find out at the end
right,
that her choice. You know,
right.
and what she's doing.
And do you notice those, if I recall, are in first? They're like present tense. So you don't know what's about to happen. You don't know what the character is about to choose. And when it's a theme of life and death, it feels like really, you're kind of white knuckling it through some sections because it's present tense and this could go any way, and I don't know what
Right.
way it's going to go, which adds to that dramatic irony, the tension, all of that. But to me, that the theme is subjective, maybe, but for me, it's life. Do I choose life or do I choose death?
I think that this one is interesting because it reminds me of a book that I was assigned in elementary school, um, where that was what we were learning about. It was point of view, and all of these different points of view were coming to this town. I have no idea what this book is. I wish I could. I
I
wish I
wish
could
you'd.
remember.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know because like it was the first time anyone told me about point of view. It was like, fourth, fifth grade. But all these characters are coming to this one town and they don't cross paths until the end. And then it's like there's this big convergence. And then so like every time, when I was reading Malazan, that's how every book almost is everyone's
Mm,
separated. It's hard, and then we come together, and then I know about everything is the same way with the hours for me,
mm-hmm.
where the thing that I had to guide me to pull me along through it was not Clarissa, and it wasn't what's her name, the
Yeah.
mom
Um,
that's
Laura.
reading Mrs. Dalloway.
Right.
And it's like a depressed head about it.
Yeah.
Like this. I mean, the reason I love her is because I relate to her so much.
Hmm.
I'm like, yes, also me. I'm gonna go check into a fucking hotel and read this book while my kid is with the babysitter.
Right.
I'm gonna tell the babysitter I have to work or something, but I'm gonna go lay down and think about maybe killing myself while I'm reading Mrs. Dalloway for like
Nice
I
little
relate to.
Tuesday.
That's maybe why I didn't enjoy her so much because I related so much to her that it was like, oh, no, no, no. But the ending of the book though was, whoa, what a fucking ending that was. And I'd seen the movie before I read it, but like the ending is where I all of these pieces that felt, I mean, like you said, there were threads, and he was giving hints all the way along that these are connected, they are connected. But I wasn't like, I wasn't like they're connected in such a way that I am extremely compelled by their connection until the end. And then it all made sense. And when an author does that, I feel two ways about it. I feel on one hand, I'm like, fuck you, dude. Like, are you kidding me? You okay, yeah, but wait till the end. Well, I just did this whole thing. It's only 5 hours. It's a small book. But
Hmm.
I just did this whole thing for you, and you're gonna wait until the end to give me the big payoff. And then on the other hand, I'm like, well, that was fucking incredible. It's, and I think that's kind of like what makes a great work of fiction sometimes is that kind of, I'm not just experiencing a dopamine release of like, okay, and oh yes, and I get it, and oh the payoff, and now oh what's gonna happen, oh the payoff. It's like there is that in the hours for me, but uh mostly there is a higher level of like thematic tissue um
Hmm.
than there is that kind of like thrill seeking, whatever you want to call it,
Right.
pleasure
And
thing.
and to me, it's, uh, courageous to write a book where the connective tissue is a book.
Right,
You
yeah.
know, like I just love, I think all of that is so clever and kind of a wink, wink. But then you're right, the ending, you realize this isn't just like, oh, a meta analysis of the influence of books over decades and, that their timelessness and all that. Certainly that's in there, but it ends up kind of still surprising you in a way at the end. But I do think it's clever to have a book be the connective tissue in a
Yeah,
book. I mean,
yeah,
it's just funny.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And the whole thing that you said about each each one being life and death is it's really powerful because of, yeah, that choice that the one character makes, which
Hmm.
I believe, um which is the one in the hotel, and
Hmm.
I forget that actress's name who plays her, Julianne Moore, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Plays her. The choice she makes is her choosing life
Hmm.
versus, juxtaposed with, anyway. Um, so, whew,
Everybody take a breath. Whew.
that was
It's a
good.
lot of books.
Yeah, that was good though. That was fucking awesome. Thank you. Okay, are the books on this list asking more of readers than most readers want to give? Is the literary fiction slash commercial fiction divide partly just a POV divide? What do you think on that, Summer?
Well, um, this is just something that I kind of think about sometimes with point of view is there is an accessibility factor for your readers and your
Right.
audience, and how accessible are you wanting your work to be. Sometimes I think is commercial fiction just really, simple POV, standard POV, whereas literary fiction, I always think about that. Where's the line with those two? And obviously there's a timestamp that divides them, but what makes something that's contemporary called literary fiction? What is, I always have wondered about that. Is it so I think a lot of times it is point of view. How experimental is the point of view? What are you asking of the readers? Because to your earlier point, sometimes you read books for a dopamine hit. Sometimes you read books, for the challenge. There's all these different reasons to read books. But I think a lot of times the ones that have a more experimental point of view, as some of these that we've listed, like Mrs. Dalloway, I think it does ask more of the reader. You have to be comfortable with that, I guess, or it's just again that accessibility. Is a general audience gonna pick it up? So that's why I think God of the Woods is a mystery fiction and will pull mystery audiences who like that tension that's built into the POV. They might not know that's why it feels so tense, but I think it's accessible enough and easy enough.
Right.
I'd be so curious to hear from Liz Moore with God of the Woods, like, was it always in that style, or was it maybe an editor who said, "Boy, this gets confusing because we're jumping around in time," and did someone then make the suggestion about the character and stamps? Because there's even like a little timeline, which we didn't mention, but in the
Yeah.
printed book, there's like a little timeline, so you always know where you are in the life of this investigation. But I think sometimes commercial versus literary is really just a comment on POV, or at least that's what I wonder about. But I don't know. Do you think any of these books ask, too much of the reader? Please
So
don't talk about Gardens of the Moon. He's going to talk about it.
let me tell you about Stephen Erikson, people. Um, here's what I think, and this is how I feel about Malazan, but this is also how I feel about Mrs. Dalloway and the Hours, and to a degree Middlesex. Is that, and I feel like there's the divide in my mind, is that God of the Woods and God of the Woods and A Game of Thrones are here. These other books are over here, where God of the Woods and these fucking G's, man. God of the Woods and Game of Thrones are more accessible. They are, you can sink right into them. They're easier. It's effortless, and it gives you that dopamine hit, but it also flirts with the line of literary, where you're gonna get a cathartic release that's like earned, um, and felt, and it can be transformative, um, especially with some of the themes that are going on in there. But I don't think it's going to be as impactful as the things that are less accessible, because they don't just ask you to like to work. I don't think that's what they're asking you to do. I think like a quote difficult novel is asking you to dance, to interact with the author, and I feel like that's the only way it can really get into my bones. Sorry, is by doing a little bit of work. And so that's where, like, when there's something that's difficult, like Gardens of the Moon or Mrs. Dalloway, I tend to not, I tend to have a frustration where I am like, you didn't have to. You could have sprinkled, like the Hours, for example, is
Mm-hmm.
like it almost feels like a little bit of sprinkling in of the more commercial as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to literary. But it maintains that balance very well. Middlesex is probably, like I said, It's my favorite version of point of view through of all of these, and it's also my favorite balance of these things altogether. I think it's the best handled. But like I said, with like Gardens of the Moon, where I got when I reread it, the theme became very powerful about isolation and empire, those two things. Um, that is, it made me look at life differently. So it's like, that's kind of like when that's my kind of gauge of like too difficult or too whatever is I'm like it is difficult, but did it change my life? Game of Thrones changed my life in like an entertainment perspective and like a craft perspective of like this is fun and I love it. But like these other ones, Middlesex is where I want, that's my
Mhm.
north of like trying to be, like that. But these other ones are like, how much do I want to invite the reader to work with me?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and that's a good question at this before you even start writing something, and it's really starting to develop. It's really hard to change the point of view after the fact. I don't know if you've ever done that with the work. It's tricky to do. So it is always a good reminder early on in a work to stop and think, is the point of view, who is it serving? Is it making it easier for me as a writer? But maybe not
Right.
giving the reader the full experience they could have. Or it's the opposite, am I asking way too much of the reader? And sometimes that's fine. Like, I know you've written things that you want them to be experimental and kind of push the bounds. And then you've written other things where you're very intentionally trying to make it accessible to general audiences. And it's different, truly different styles. But it always matters, I guess, with the characters and the theme and what you're trying to do. The point of view always matters and should always serve those ends. And anytime you feel like you're wrestling with it, that's a good, indication that something's not working right.
Hold
Or
on.
maybe there's a better point of view that would serve you.
Okay, when you the writer are experiencing, I want to pause on this. So
Mhm.
when you the writer are experiencing difficulty in the writing process, maybe that's a sign that you are in the wrong POV. Is that what you
Yes.
said?
Yes. So traditionally, if you look at literature up through like YA literature is tends to be first person, right? You're just kind of first person. Tense doesn't matter so much, but that's just typically what we read. As an early reader, it's a lot of first person. So I think, especially if you're a newer writer or, just kind of starting to get things down, the inclination is to sometimes go into a first person POV, but which is sometimes fine, but just know that sometimes you do that because that's just almost what you've been trained by as a reader. Especially if you're, I don't know, 20s or something, and you've been reading, a lot of kind of classic literature and things. A lot of that's going to be in first person. So that might be how the story comes to you, but that's only because that's the tool that you know how to use best. That does not mean that it actually needs to be in first person. I mean, I would always stop and ask, if you can, if you're early on in a project, stop and ask yourself, even if it's putting a table next to you of all the different POVs and what they mean, because there are a lot of them. We've touched on some, but there's a lot of ways you can do things. But actually think about it, kind of pros and cons of first person, second person, third person limited, third person omniscient. What's added? What's lost? What's the tension like? What's the underlying theme? An exercise like that can only benefit the writing, even if you end up saying, okay, I did all this and I'm going to keep it in first person, because then you very strategically identified why it's going to work better being in first person. And you can really make sure that that's clear and coming across to the reader. But it's like an audit. You should always do a POV audit of what you're working on and make sure that it's right. It is a big change. I mean, if someone were to suggest to you, you've completed a first draft and someone comes back and says, hey, this is in, you know, third person omniscient, but I think it would be better in a limited POV, and this is why. That's not an easy fix, and it shouldn't be an easy fix because POV is embedded into the work. So changing it is not simple, but if it serves it better and you've identified the reason why, then I feel like it's just sort of your obligation. If you actually want to engage with the reader, it's your obligation to create it in a POV that serves the work the best. And it's the best way to get later ideas. Like, I feel like there's a tangent about kind of the spiritual nature of writing, but I think if an idea comes to you, it's your obligation to serve it, not make it serve you and meet your writing style, but what does that work need? In the same way that these writers stopped and thought about, how does being trapped in Ned Stark's mind add to the ultimate experience for the reader? Really understanding that. A lot of times we're told, don't think about the reader while you're writing. But I do think when it comes to POV, you have to think about the reader pretty early on to think about their experience and the many layers that they will experience and the best way to kind of present it to them. And to decide, what am I going to ask of these readers? Is it really for a general audience? Then don't get all fancy with the point of view and switch it all around, because then you're just having conflicting goals and you're not going to achieve them. So being really clear. Writers tend to, it's like, we're artists but it's kind of a cop out. You have to be strategic. I mean, so you have to blend the two.
Here's where I'm going to disagree with you again on this podcast. Number two, disagreement
Okay.
number two
Okay.
is that I agree with you, but I feel like that can happen at different points in the process. Like I know that a lot of people won't start a work until they do have that, and
Until they have point of view determined.
Point of view determined. Yeah, like the connective tissue, all of it. Like they'll have, or just point of view. But and this is why I'm using point of view. Whereas as you were just talking, I was just kind of going through one of my projects, and how it was all third person Game of Thrones type, and then it became clear 2 years later that as you said, with the idea comes to you, you have to serve that idea. I didn't know what was serving that idea until 2 years later, after starting and writing 500,000 words of it, and then I was like, oh, and now and so I feel like it's almost like for me, that's kind of a bummer, honestly, is the idea of writing 500,000 words before figuring out what. So I feel like you're right in that if you want to be efficient, then maybe you should wait as a writer until you have that nailed down of what serves this book, what kind of point of view. Is it first person? Is that what's going to serve this book the best? Or do I not fucking know? But I want to write. I would need to write today,
Right.
which is my method, which tends to lead to a bunch of work that I don't use. But out of that, I can kind of cut out this. So I it's not so much a disagreement really, because it's the same thing, right? You end up at.
So this was kind of rage bait. Is that what this is?
What, me talking right now? That's pretty much all I'm ever doing.
Well, so yes, it's not always that you can do it right away. Yeah. And in which case you just write it out. I mean, you get the idea down, but yes, I wouldn't take it a step further towards a publishing goal without understanding what your readers are experiencing. Um, and I, people rarely think about point of view. I mean, a lot of times I've gotten works and I'll ask the writer, what POV is this? And they stop and they have to think, which is fine. That means they were just in the moment getting it down, but it also shows me that they haven't, there are different stages of writing, and one of them, it doesn't, I guess, matter the time as much, but it is absolutely, it has to happen, is when you have some clarity and some objectivity about your work and can look at things like point of view and can think about the reader's experience. So it's different for every idea, I guess, when that point might be, but you have to get to that point.
Right.
Or pay somebody
Yeah.
to get to that point for you. If you
Right.
can't get there, you have trouble with objectivity. And I think about, some writers are more delicate than others. Some of them, I can't think about my reader, it messes with my process. Okay, then pay someone, who will think about the reader for you and make sure that the reader's experience is what you want it to be.
Right.
For the
Right.
longevity of your craft. You kind of have to do it at some point.
Yeah. Do you think, I mean, as an editor and a damn good one, I will say, how much do you think an editor can do as far as that goes? Like you were just talking about somebody giving you a manuscript where they don't even know what the point of view is, which to me is like that feels very alien to me, because I do consider point of view up front, even if it might change. When I'm going into a project, I am like, this is going to be a first person, and like this is the book, and as I'm writing it, I have to have this kind of attitude of this is the final word, even though I know that like later I'm going to edit it or whatever. When I'm writing it, it has to feel like important.
Mm-hmm.
But you're saying you get manuscripts that are actually like, yeah, they don't even know what the point of view is. So how much of that can be left to the editor? Does it depend on the editor? I mean, is it a common practice for editors to get a manuscript that doesn't even know what the point of view is, and for them to then help the author figure that out?
Well, I think it depends. Usually it's first time authors that don't know their point of view. Or it can be a long term author, but it might be an idea that came to them more fully formed. That's kind of what I see yoked together more is generally the manuscripts that have really been labored over, the person has usually thought about point of view. But those ideas, and hopefully we've all had this happen, where the ones that just kind of come to you and you can't even keep up, like, right, getting it out on the page,
Yeah.
those tend to be the manuscripts that where the person has thought less about point of view, and it's generally because they're kind of chasing the muse, trying to keep up, and it came to them more fully formed than some of their other writing, and because of that, they don't have that critical eye on it. They're just kind of still blown away that it even came to them at all. So I think there are times, even for the most disciplined author, there can be times when you turn something over to an editor and you're like, I don't know where that came from, but this is how it came to me. And you lack objectivity because you didn't like fight for it in the same way that you fought for some other writing. So sometimes it's that. It's less about the experience of the writer and more about the nature of creativity and kind of the question marks that go along with it. That might taint someone's objectivity. But it's very common for editors to adjust point of view. It's really common to get a manuscript that the writer knows is chaotic. And they don't really know what the answer is to it, and will be surprised to find sometimes that you can do some of these things we've talked about, like each chapter is a different character, or God of the Woods is a really unique, chapter openings with their time, not just the time stamp, but the timeline. Right. Okay. So John is showing this now.
It's on the screen. I'm
Right.
showing it.
So it's all the
Voice.
important dates that take place in the book, and then one is bolded to show you you're in the 1950s, for example. So that is a pretty easy fix when you think about it. And that's why I don't know if Liz Moore wrote it that way or if that was an editorial change. But sometimes a writer, it's euphoric when you realize I can make this one small change that's easy to do, and suddenly the chaos is gone, the dissonance
Yeah.
is gone. You've just fixed it all, and you look like this amazing wizard, and all you've done is like slapped a timestamp on the chapter opening. But it's very common to, from an editorial standpoint, to adjust point of view. It can sometimes be a full rewrite, which is not what the author might want to do. But
I've
and
done
again,
it.
what's that?
I've done that.
It's a beast. I mean, you're basically rewriting the whole thing. But sometimes too, it might be one particular the birth of an idea might be monologue from one character that you feel really, this character is what came to you fully formed. So it makes sense that you might
Right.
write that in first person, but that doesn't mean 2 years later when you're still working on it that it's the same. That's just how it came to you. It was that one voice, that one character was the kind of wormhole to get you into the world. But that doesn't mean you're necessarily stuck with that.
I like that wormhole to get you into the world.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had a couple questions before we close here in just a little bit, but I want to give you a little a little editor's puzzle.
Okay.
Um, so as we were talking, and I already mentioned this, that I've been working on something with 10 first person point of view, all based in the same place. And you told me that the important thing is to have some connective tissue
Mm-hmm.
in all of that, so they're all relevant, and that if one of them, these are the things I've learned in this podcast, which is amazing, but all of them have to have a reason for being there. If you take one point of view out, doesn't matter, and if it doesn't matter, then take that point of view out. You don't need it.
Right.
And so like those are a couple things that I've taken away from that as far as applying it to that project, which is like a
Mm-hmm.
difficult point of view project, is what
Mm-hmm.
the way
Mm-hmm.
I view it. So here's my puzzle. Is the other thing is that at the outset of the work, set up the structure, so you make that promise immediately of what the reader's going to be going through.
Mm-hmm.
So I love that so much, and I want you to tell me, how could a writer possibly do that with a difficult type of point of view setup, like 10 first person point of views that are not all in the same family? They're potentially different in different parts of town.
Mm-hmm.
How can you set it up that these right at the beginning?
I would say make your structural promise in the first 50 pages. So
So
what that
how?
means, so if, for example, it is going to be different POVs,
Yeah.
then within those first 50 pages, you don't want one POV to go those 50 pages, right? So maybe it's 25 pages each, but make sure that that is understood, that structural promise is made early. That way, even though it might feel strange when you switch the first time to the new POV, it feels designed and not accidental. And that's always what you're going for: designed, not accidental. So that's, I mean, whatever it is, whatever. Sometimes it can be, maybe you have a table of contents, and you, when you open the book, you can see, Betty, Steve, Fred, Tom, and oh, I get it. This is what this is going to be. But it's pretty
Scooter.
simple. So
Scooter.
simple. I'm just kidding.
Scooter's my favorite name of yours that you came up with off the cuff. That was a different conversation, but Betty, Steve, and Scooter.
And Scooter, sure.
Where's
We need
Scooter?
Scooter's POV just as much as we need anyone else's.
Okay, well, yeah, I love that. All right, so drum roll. We're at the end of the episode where I get to tell Summer the book that she must read next month. And if she has one for me, then I have to read that one too. But here's mine. It is Geek Love by Catherine Dunn. You
Read
heard of
it.
it? You've read it?
Yes. Ooh, now what? Now it's my turn.
All right. All right, let's hear it. And I'll think of how to reply to that.
I think next you're going to be reading some poetry, John Franz.
Okay.
Yep. Poetry is on your horizon. Think you're gonna probably read a little Billy Collins, some Picnic Lightning specifically, and we'll probably read some Good Bones by Maggie Smith.
So
Do you read poetry, John?
No.
Perfect.
I have always not understood why.
Ooh,
And
this is gonna be fun.
yeah, it's definitely a prejudice, like, to poetry. I don't know. I don't know when or where I got that prejudice, but it's there.
Mm.
Where I'm like, why are we doing this?
Mm. Wow.
Probably the same thing you feel about Malazan. You're like, oh, why? Who cares?
Oh, surely we're not going to equate those experiences. A chapbook versus Gardens of the Moon. Holy cow.
Same amount of brain power. Same amount.
Yeah.
Billy Collins and
That's the
who's
difference
in-
of picking up the trash for 2 hours on a Saturday as a community project versus a lifetime sentence in jail.
Oh, damn.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, God. Stephen Erikson. I'm so sorry, man.
You should have come on the podcast.
Should have been here to defend
you
yourself.
should have been here. Yeah.
And so we have Billy Collins, Picnic Lightning, and what was the other one?
Good Bones, Maggie Smith.
These are for March.
Okay.
March, Maggie Smith.
Oh, I will reread Geek Club. It's been a while since I read it, so I would reread it. But I guess it's kind of lost its charm now that you thought you were forcing me to read something that I've already read. So
Did you like it?
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I
Yeah.
just had another idea of a book I'm going to make you read, but I'll save that.
Well, I thought
Yeah,
these
we'll save it.
poetry books were for February.
It is February.
Yeah. So I've been busting through them.
Oh, okay. So you want me to give you something else to read?
You can for March.
Well, I think I need to think on that. That's a big. We'll probably read some Toni Morrison.
Okay.
Or we also haven't, we need to do some nonfiction and some short stories.
All right.
So maybe we'll do a short story collection next. And so I'd probably choose When the Messenger is Hot by Elizabeth Crane.
When the Messenger is Hot.
Yep. Everyone should read it.
You have to reread Geek Love.
Okay, I'll reread it.
So we are going to be making each other read these books and then talking about them in the months to come. But anyway, that's it for today on Point of View. Summer, thank you so much. It was an incredible conversation.
Thank you, John. It's maybe next time we did 6 books today. Next time we can punch that up to what, 8 maybe? 8, 9?
Yeah.
We'll see.
We're the 8-book podcast, and somehow Malazan shows up every time. That'll be
Yeah. Someone's got to lock him out next time. I'm going to buzz you next time.
yeah. All right, bye, Summer. Have a good day.
Bye, John. Thank you. Bye.